Welcome and thank you for being here. Bob Bayer, our guest today, Criminal Justice Management, one of his many, many titles. Bob, welcome to you. Well, you have a lot of titles on your card, I notice here, but let me just ask, what is Criminal Justice Management? What do you do?
Well, it's really a field where you hope that at some point you'll become an administrator in either a police agency, a correctional agency, parole and probation.
And you've been involved in many of those, haven't
I've been
you?
2 out of the 3. And what you hope to do is develop the kinds of skills you need to really make sure that you're running a very efficient and effective operation. That's what the field really is trying to train you to do. And in this world of tight fiscal resources, that's very important.
I know you've been involved in the justice system for a long time, and specifically with the Nevada State Prison system.
Yes, I actually started there in 1974, and I worked my way through the system. I was the first person who was appointed director of the system who actually came through the system at every step.
You say that there's been a lot of technical changes. Specifically, tell us how the system has changed from the old days when the warden pretty much was the main guy and ran the entire prison system.
It has changed so much, and I think when I really began to realize that was after work. You'd be sitting down having dinner with somebody, or you'd be having a drink somewhere, and you'd have some of the younger people around. You'd be telling your stories about what it used to be, when snow was 4 feet deep. And they just look with big eyes. It has really changed a lot when our technology was entirely different. How we ran the system with the inmates were different. The nature of the inmates were different. Our resources were different. If you look at the movie The Green Mile with Tom Hanks, you sort of get a picture of what it used to be and how things used to be done a long time ago. And we used to take inmates out up to the Judicial College to talk to the judges, and those inmates would be lifers, and we'd take them with no restraints. I mean, everything has changed, and the inmates have changed.
How do we stack up, Bob, here in the state of Nevada with our prison system? Is it a good one?
We have an excellent system. I always used to say, the closer you look, the better we look. That's the way it should be. We have an advantage, I think, because we're a smaller system. So as you are coming through the system, you get to really work in every different area as you go up the career ladder. Whereas a lot of other systems, big systems, you sort of have to pick what field it is, what part of corrections. If you want to be in classification, you start early, and that's all you learn. In Nevada, you have to know it all. You have to be a triple threat. You have to understand security, you have to understand programs, and you have to understand budget. You really have to understand budget.
We know, of course, about the Carson City prison and Ely, but we have prisons all over the state of Nevada now, I believe.
We've got most of our inmates actually come from the Las Vegas area, and that's where the majority of our population is. We've got a very large prison at High Desert State Prison, and we've got another one at Southern Desert Prison. We've actually got a closed mothballed, what we call mothballed prison over at Southern Nevada Correctional Center, which is south of Las Vegas. But the majority of our inmates are up there. Our maximum security prison moved from Nevada State Prison, which most of the public still remembers as our max prison, which was closed last year, and we moved it to Ely, which was built in the early 80s. And I tell you, that is a fantastic maximum security prison. If you think about it, you never see them in the news. There has never been an escape from there. They really run an outstanding maximum security prison. When I was director, I was very proud of that, and I used to tell the other directors, you want to look at a good max prison, look at Nevada.
I believe I heard you say in recent remarks that we either have a privatized prison system or we had one.
We had one. We had one. I actually privatized the women's prison in 1995 in response to a great need. We had most of the female inmates were from the Las Vegas area. If you looked at their visiting, they were getting none of their visits. The children weren't coming. It was just too long a trek. It was burdensome, and frankly, we weren't doing a very good job with the women. And a number of the legislators wanted fast change. When you want fast change, then you're talking privatization. So I privatized the women's prison down there, and they actually built that facility in 11 months, had it up and operating, and they did a very good job for us. Corrections Corporation of America ran it back then.
Do you see privatization of the prison system here in the state of Nevada becoming a reality? We'll have more?
They've continued to get a market share, and I teach online for University of Maryland and for University of Nevada, and I constantly get asked that question, how I feel about privatization. The best way to describe it is, it's like a tool in a toolbox. There are times when privatization makes a lot of sense. There are times when it doesn't. For example, when I privatized, we had to build one fast. And they can do it faster. We didn't have to go for bonding. We didn't have to go through 3 sessions to get all the approvals needed to design, then to construct, then to staff. As long as those conditions exist, and as long as sentencing keeps changing, I think that you'll find there'll always be a place for a private prison, and they fill a very valuable need for us.
Tell us about the suggested changes to parole and probation.
Well, apparently the Department of Corrections, in their budget, they've asked to move the Division of Parole and Probation from public safety over to the prison system and put it all under one roof.
What would be the advantage of that, do you think?
Well, inmates on parole are still inmates, so they're still part of the system. We have to work very closely. I worked for parole and probation as well. I was an operations supervisor in charge of parole revocations. So there has to be a very smooth transition for inmates moving from the institutions into parole, and you have to research their programs, where they're going to live. You got to protect the public. And then it can be done, I think, a little more efficiently if it's done under one roof. And then the same go for revocations. When you're going to revoke somebody, they've got to go to a neutral site like a jail to be processed. So they have their due process hearing to see if the revocation's appropriate. Then they get moved to the prison. Meanwhile, while they're there in the jail, they're taking up expensive beds in a jail, and they're causing a problem.
What kind of dollars are we talking about to actually have a prisoner, house a prisoner in the state of Nevada on an annual basis?
I am not up on the current costs. I haven't looked at their budget. It just, wasn't something that I usually do. I can tell you that when I retired, and that was in 2000, the cost was $41 a day. I'm willing to bet you're into the 60s now, and that's probably it. It's pretty expensive because medical care is expensive. We do it, though, as cost effectively as better than most states. I've seen some very high prices.
Cuts in budget at all levels, federal and of course the state. There's been some tightening of the belt, I would imagine, in the prison system.
Oh yeah, I think they've done a wonderful job. The legislature works very closely, I think, with the prison system, and the prison system's job is to produce population forecasts, tell them how the sentencing is going, what the long-term effects are going to be. We project populations out to about 10 years, and then if there's any what we call tweaking to do, if we see any way we can protect the public, that's our primary job. Provide for the safety and security of the staff and the inmates, and in some way keep the population stable through new programs, release programs, better programming. We're going to do that, and they've done a great job. The population has not increased any more than it was when I retired in 2000.
Well, Bob, you certainly are an interesting gentleman. You have a wide and varied background, and specifically, what do you do today? You said you did some online teaching. What else are you doing?
Well, I consult, of course. It's unusual to have somebody with a PhD who is also a director of corrections. There's only 2 or 3 of us in the country. So there's always demand for certain kinds of consulting. I've consulted for the State Department, and I've consulted for other states.
You consult for police departments?
And I will consult for anybody who needs a good assessment of what's going on in terms of their detention facilities or management, things like that. But I really love teaching, and unfortunately, because I'm a retiree from PERS, I can't teach full-time at the university, but I can teach online a certain amount of courses in their graduate program. So we started a very nice justice management program with the University of Nevada, Reno, and then the Judicial College up there, and then the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges. The 3 got together to offer a very unique management program. And it's working very well. In fact, my portion of a class starts today.
There's a lot of conversation these days, Bob, about prisoners that are in there for really minor violations, use of marijuana as an example. Is that really overcrowding our prison system?
Well, I think, it really has 2 parts. I deal with that a lot with my students. When I challenge them to come up with ways of running efficient systems, they always say, eliminate the minor criminals, the ones who are just in there for smoking pot, for example. And then I say, do you really know how many are in there? There aren't many. They go through diversionary programs, They only come to prison if and when every other management tool has failed. You're not going to get sent to prison. Judges are not going to do that if you're possession of a couple of ounces of marijuana. They're just not going to do that. So what you really want to do is you want to look at what the controlling sentence is of your inmates in your system. So, for example, if I'm preparing for the legislature, one of the first things I do with my classification division, I say, run me a print. I want to know how many inmates I have and what the controlling sentence is. What are they in there for? And the controlling sentence means you might have a consecutive sentence, means it's running after it, or a concurrent sentence, it's rolled into one sentence. But there's one big sentence they got sentenced in. And you want to know what those are. So you might have X amount of inmates in there for murder, X amount of inmates in there for a robbery. That's really how you want to break it down. People confuse that with, was it part of the crime? In other words, somebody might be in there for a robbery. Well, they might also have a drinking problem. They might also have a drug problem. It's not why they're in there. I don't think we have many inmates. We've done a good job diverting inmates. You've got drug courts into that. Probation does a fantastic job, I think. And so it's really minor.
Finally, Bob, tell us how people can get a hold of you and take advantage of your many talents.
I'm at robert.baer@umuc.edu. That's the best one to catch me at. I always check that mailbox.
So if you need somebody in a consulting capacity that knows a lot about prisons and
I'm
law
on-
enforcement, this is the man.
I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Facebook, I do network, I'm in the local Rotary clubs, and you can certainly get a hold of me, but I tell you, I just have a passion for corrections, and Nevada continues to do a really good job. We should be proud of our system.
Well, Bob, thank you very much. We do appreciate you being our guest, and we appreciate you being here. I'm Bob Carroll. Join us next time.